On today's show, I'm going to break down, could the Texans actually draft a receiver in round 1 of the 2025 NFL draft? I've seen a ton of your mock drafts that you sent me on Instagram, on Twitter, and I do have to say a lot of them have the Texans taking a receiver in round 1. So I'll talk about the possibility of that because we actually saw Tank Dell out and about this week. He was spotted at a U of H basketball game earlier in the week, and it's just great to see Tank out there. I mean, he's been through so much in his first 2 seasons in the NFL, and I mean, he's one of my favorite Texans players. You know, went to U of H, wanted to be a Texan, loves the city of Houston, and seeing him out is kind of a bittersweet moment because I love seeing him out there, right? But it's also a reminder that we're not going to see him this year for the Houston Texans. I mean, best case scenario, he shows up at the very end of the season, but it does kind of put it in the back of your mind once again. Do the Texans really need a wide receiver? Is that like one of the top needs for Houston this offseason? Because I've been clamoring for O-line help. But could receiver come to a close second or maybe overtake the need for offensive line for the Houston Texans this offseason? And because of that reason, because I've seen all your mocks, I'm going to break down 5 guys who I could see the Texans drafting in round 1 to help out the receiver spot. So first up, got to go with Emeka Egbuka. I've seen this in multiple mock drafts for the Houston Texans, and it is a very intriguing option. Obviously, Emeka Egbuka, CJ Stroud, they go way back. They were teammates at Ohio State, and I could see this as an option if he's on the board at 25 for the Houston Texans. I mean, 2024 had over 1,000 yards for the Buckeyes, and if you look at the last time he played with CJ Stroud in 2022, he was arguably the top option for him that season. I mean, 1,100 yards, 10 touchdowns, 74 grabs in 13 games. He was fantastic with Stroud. And could they possibly emulate that here in Houston? 81 grabs, 10 touchdowns this past year. 6'1", 205, is a good route runner, is a very smart football player too. Him and Stroud have a great connection, so obviously they don't have to go through the kind of chemistry concerns that you would have with maybe other receiving options. I think it's a very intriguing option for the Texans in round 1 if they want to go receiver and pick Emeka Egbuka. Now, mentioning, I obviously, have been seeing all your mock drafts. You've been sending it to me on social media. My DMs are still open. If you want to talk shop, if you want to talk Texans football, talk about the draft, you can add me on X at Jeremy Chugs. On IG, it's Texans Today CS. That's the official IG account for Texans Today. And if you want to follow me on TikTok, some of those, at Jeremy Chugs as well. Maybe throwing some dances there. I don't know. It's mostly Texans content, but maybe some more crazy stuff over on TikTok. All those links are in the comment section and description of today's video. Give me a follow, hit my DMs, and let me know what you think about today's video. Next up, this was a recent mock draft pick for ESPN. Field Yates put out his latest mock draft the other day. I was actually kind of surprised. He had Luther Burden III falling to the Texans at 25 out of Missouri because going into 2024, he was arguably the top receiving option, the top receiving prospect in Mel Kiper's big board. He was great in 2023, over 1,200 yards, 9 touchdowns, 86 grabs. This year took a little bit of a step back, but I mean, you could say that about the entire Mizzou program. I think he is still a great option. A little bit of smaller frame, 5'11", 208, kind of a stockier build. 61 receptions, over 600 yards this year. Not as good as his 2023 campaign. But I still think he could be a top 20 pick in this year's draft. And I'm coming around to the idea of going wide receiver early in the draft. But either Luther Burden or Emeka Egbuka, both those guys I could see going before the Texans pick. And I would hate the idea of the Texans trading up and giving multiple picks away to go get a wide receiver. If one falls to you, if there's somebody who is high on your board, like a Luther Burden that falls to 25, then I'm like, okay, you know what? I'm okay with the Texans going with great value there at pick 25. But if you're wanting to, trade up into the teens and get a wide receiver and give up a second or a third round pick in that trade as well, I hate that idea. I can't get around to that. I'm starting to come around to the idea of going receiver early, but I can't see the idea of trading up for one early in this year's draft. With this next guy, I'm actually cheating. Tyler Warren is a tight end, but he's a receiving tight end who I think if is there at 25, like I said about Luther Burden, the value might just smack you in the face and say, hey, you got to take Tyler Warren with this pick if he falls there. I've seen a lot of people saying the Texans need a tight end this offseason. I'm not in that camp as much. I think they're decent at tight end with Cade Stover, with Brevin Jordan coming back. Also, Dalton Schultz still on the roster. Might get traded. I don't know. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think the Texans need a tight end this offseason? Is it a top need for Houston? Because a lot of people think so. And Tyler Warren, if he falls, could be a great pick at pick 25. Look what he did at Penn State this past season. 104 receptions, over 1,200 yards, 8 touchdowns for the tight end. He's also a great blocker. And with new Texans OC Nick Caserio coming from a background being a tight end coach, could he see Warren and say, dude, what I could scheme up for this guy right here, maybe that's an intriguing pick for the Houston Texans. He's actually the only tight end that I would be okay with the Texans taking in round 1. And also, if they go ahead and draft Tyler Warren in round 1, I think you have to consider trading away Dalton Schultz. I talked about this in a video I did earlier in the week. If you missed it, that's going to be in the comment section of today's video. My trade video for the Houston Texans, some top trade candidates that could save some cap space for this team in free agency this year. But if you go ahead and draft a guy like Tyler Warren, I think you almost have to trade away a guy like Dalton Schultz. Almost. Maybe. But coming up, I have 2 more options in round 1, some receiving threats that the Texans could look at if they want to go receiver early. But first, I saw this online, and I was like, you know what? It would be criminal. It would be absolutely criminal if I didn't share it with you, because there's a ton of sales going on with our friends over at Fanatics. If you go to chatsports.com/Texans hats, that'll send you straight to their website, and it'll let them know that we sent you over there. But I was checking it out today. A ton of deals, a ton of flash sales over there. They have a ton of options as well. They have the secondary logo in a bunch of different varieties as well. They have, flat bills. They have, the beach hat. A ton of different options. They have beanies. They have, dad hats. All different hats, sizes, available over at Fanatics right now. Go check them out. The link is in the comment section and description of today's video. Hey, it's almost summertime. It's going to be sunny outside. You're going to want some Texans gear. And let's be honest, right? In this economy, we can't all afford a jersey. So go out and get a $20 hat like this one and go flex your Texans fandom out there with our friends over at Fanatics. Next up, Matthew Golden. A lot of people might love this name because he comes from the University of Texas, and he had a great season. Also, former U of H Cougar, so could he be coming home to Houston? In 2024, was one of the top receiving options for Quinn Ewers in Austin. 58 receptions, almost 1,000 yards, 9 touchdowns this year for Golden. I really like his build. 6 foot, 195 pounds, is great top end speed, a really good route runner as well. I wouldn't hate the idea of going Matthew Golden in round 1. Depending on who's on the board, I still think if the pick's Matthew Golden, then a bunch of offensive linemen better be off the board, because I really think the Texans should go wider or should go offensive line unless there is a top receiver on the board. I'd also be okay if the Texans want to maybe trade back a little bit in round 1, maybe trade back in the 30s to get a guy like Matthew Golden or get a guy like Tre Harris, because both these guys are fringe round 1 guys. They're fringe late 20s, 30s, maybe beginning of round 2. I could see that's where Matthew Golden or Tre Harris could be slated in this year's draft. And if the Texans want to recoup some picks, because they only have 6 in the upcoming draft, I could get behind that option of trading back a little bit and getting a guy like Golden or somebody like Tre Harris out of Ole Miss, who was arguably Jackson Dart's top receiving option there for the Rebels this season, formerly at Louisiana Tech. But, I mean, some solid numbers. 3 straight years over 900 yards for Harris is a bigger body X receiver. So we know Nico Collins, he's a bigger guy, but he's done some of his best work out of the slot. So if you want to, kick him in more often, put a guy like Tre Harris on the outside, could be a decent option for the Texans if they're looking for receiving options in round 1. Don't hate the idea of Tre Harris being there if the Texans want to trade back a little bit in round 1. Now, that's all I have for you on today's show, folks. Make sure you hit that sub button, and make sure, give me a follow on social media over at Jeremy Chugs. I'm always down to talk shop, so slide in my DMs and let me know what you thought about today's video.